Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi,
Are
Sherri.
you in your car?
Yes, indeed. We have lost power out here at my house since yesterday.
Oh,
So I'm being resourceful, and I've parked in front of a healthcare facility that let me jump onto their Wi-Fi. So I have solid enough signal for video. And yes, I'm in the car. So, making it work.
Was that one of the power outages, Sherri?
Yes, it has been out since yesterday, probably about 7 o'clock.
Oh,
And
I'm so
there's no indication yet when it's going to be returned for us. So National Grid has not even determined the assessment yet. I live out in Sturbridge.
Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And not all of Sturbridge is out, thankfully. So, but yeah, I live quite a bit in the woods. So I have power, just not internet.
Sherri.
I'm very happy to introduce Sherri Pilski. We met a little more than a month ago. We were introduced by Klaus Hatchfeld, who our former district governor. They are both from Sturbridge, and Sherri is going to talk to us about Comfort Zone Camp. And I mentioned Comfort Zone Camp maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago, but I'm going to remind you that it's a program for kids and teenagers who have lost a family member. That was Sherri's situation. In 2010, she lost her husband. Their daughter, Nicole, was 3 at the time. When Nicole was 8, she participated in Comfort Zone Camp, which was, I believe, a sleepaway weekend program. And it was a remarkable transformation for Nicole. So Sherri became more involved with the program, and she has volunteered with the Regional Advisory Committee, was its chairperson for a few years, and she's currently in the New England Volunteer Committee for community engagement and donor support. And we know what donor support means. Professionally, Sherri Pilski is a financial services executive with expertise in startup and entrepreneurial environments, with asset management, hedge fund, and mutual fund sectors, having earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Bentley and a master's in business administration from Boston University. So she has a lot to tell us about Comfort Zone Camp. And I'll just remind the club that the board has pledged to pay the tuition for any Brookline kids who might benefit from Comfort Zone Camp. And I have spoken to the Brookline Mental Health Center about this and let them know that they should be on the lookout for kids who might benefit from Comfort Zone Camp. And if they identify any, our club will contribute the tuition fee for them. So with that, please welcome Sherri Pilski.
Thank you very much, Phil. That was amazing intro and told a bit of my story, so I appreciate that and bridging to my speech. And thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share today and really educate you about an organization that I am very fortunate to honestly have stumbled upon. And let me start, I am completely amazed at the impact that Rotarians have in our community. I was very new meeting Klaus, and I'll lead you through my speech, but I found him because our school nurse, where my daughter had been going to school for 6 years, watched her transformation and that in our family and said to me, what is happening for you? Nicole used to be in my office every week, a couple days a week, And she has slowly evolved into, I'm seeing her less, but she's happy, she's smiling. And I shared with her that it was this comfort zone camp that I had discovered. And so how we found Klaus was we decided to do and sponsor in Sturbridge a family day program, which we put on a couple years ago. We had 35 people attend. There was such a great interest in our community and people realizing how important this work was. We were asked to do it a second time, which we just did in December of 19. And it was through that initiative of returning Comfort Zone to Sturbridge that Lisa said, you need to talk to the Rotarians. They have, you know, they're on the pulse of our community, because we were looking at that time to expand past Sturbridge to Charlton, to Southbridge, to many other districts. And so through meeting Klaus, this ball sort of took shape. And here I am actually, thankfully, speaking again to another Rotary and sharing our story about Comfort Zone. You know, if we pause for a moment, I bet we can all think of someone who's lost a parent, sibling, and caregiver. And now with this pandemic, Comfort Zone has opened their mandate to include the loss of grandparents and other significant people in the kids' lives. And what happens is, you know, you might know someone in your family, or it could be a neighbor, or it could have been a firefighter's family who was on the front lines, or someone who, you know, passed of cancer. And so oftentimes the community is amazing in rallying around these families, really at the immediacy of the traumatic event. There's a lot of publicity at times, or even in the family, it's like, oh my gosh, this traumatic and horrible thing has happened. What happens though is, you know, what happens to that family after the initial time and the trauma? And so that's really what my daughter and I had been living. You know, we struggled for very many years trying to figure out what sort of support and finding a way through our grief, whether it be, you know, through a therapist or, you know, all sorts of little classes I tried to get my daughter to, or even my own support and therapy. And what evolved was my daughter still remained really sad. And the crux of that was, and I was oftentimes trying to have an adult conversation with a, you know, a young child, I would say, Nicole, many people don't have a dad, that maybe they're divorced, or maybe they live with their grandparents, or maybe they don't see them anymore. But she's like, well, Mom, but they know there's a dad. And oftentimes they can speak to their dad, and I can never talk to my dad again. And how this came to be with, you know, Nurse Lisa was, she would oftentimes be on the playground and other kids would start talking about a dad or Father's Day or something they did with their dad, and she would quietly slither away even at her young age. So nothing was moving the needle, including therapy. So it was recommended she try this camp. And what's wonderful about Comfort Zone is the whole concept, and it's free for children, is that, and families, is that they put the children together in a very fun summer camp environment with icebreakers and fun games. And then as they're going through that and getting more comfortable and meeting the kids, they break them into little healing circles led by a licensed social therapist who's gone through some Comfort Zone training. And it allows the children to be in what they call this bubble where they can share a little bit, maybe share a lot, or sometimes not share, but they hear a story from another kid. And in that moment, they feel that they're really not alone. And that's what happened to us. I picked my daughter up, she was 8, and pretty much all I got that first year was, Mom, there's more kids like me there. I thought it had a big impact, but what I realized was a couple months later, she was at a CCD class, Catholic religion. There were a couple little kids there who had lost a sibling, and the teacher reported back to me that my daughter had actually piped up and said to the two little boys, don't worry, there's a camp for kids just like us. It's not far from here. My mommy can get your mommy the address. And in that moment, I knew that it had now had such a transformative impact. And now I've lived it. And now she's 13 and she's gone on to, you know, write her grief story. She's thriving. She volunteers with Comfort Zone. She actually speaks to other kids in her schools that happen to have lost parents or a sibling. And so through all of that, I became more involved. And what's staggering in our communities is some statistics. And let me just briefly share with you. You know, families and children, when they suffer these devastating traumatic events, there's 5 times more likely to commit suicide, 9 times more likely to drop out of high school, 10 times more likely to engage in substance abuse, and 20 times more likely to have behavioral disorders. And it's just such an incredible need. And so I shared with you how I met Klaus. The organization has been around for 20 years, and they do a little bit of mix of 2 things. They have general camps, which is what you have been very gracious to say you will sponsor a child to a New England camp. They also do strategic partnerships, such as National Fallen Firefighters. There's a suicide group. There's Blue Hope, which is for families of police officers. They've done day programs. They've done the weekend camps. And now they're doing virtual programs for the kids. And so how I have very thankfully, you know, come together today was I spoke before Klaus and his group. He opened it up to a number of other Rotaries, and I actually also presented to District Governor Diana. And so I'm very appreciative that this, you know, ball has really started to roll, and because really I view my role as a little bit with 3 prongs to it. And I actually have written 3 papers that I'd like to send and share to you afterwards. And each one is particularly geared toward the 3 prongs. And one of them is Rotarian outreach. Yes, you know, Phil very graciously said that you would consider funding these children, but part of that is trying to find the children and bring awareness to this program and to let organizations know that you found a child, here is an option for them to be part of a group. So there's the outreach part. The other part of it is also, you know, needing volunteers. And very briefly, the need for volunteers is pretty big at Comfort Zone, because for every child that attends a camp, yes, there's the whole logistical support staff to make it happen, but there's also events that happen all year, and every child that goes to a camp is assigned a big buddy. And big buddies can be anyone from 15 years and up. And what happens, and why that big buddy volunteer is so important, is in my case, the first time my daughter went to camp, she had never left my side since the day of her father's passing. So for these children, it's very scary to be handed off by your caregiver and spend 3 days in a strange situation. So a big buddy is assigned to call the mom ahead of time, to call the child ahead of time, to greet them right at the gates of the camp. And, you know, thankful for me, you know, it was an elementary school teacher who was very loving and supportive to my daughter, but they stay with them through the whole camp, eating and in the cabins, and just being there as someone who they've had a chance to talk to in this before they enter this whole new environment. And so, you know, we do different fundraisers during the year. We do a walk to remember, which tradition this year is virtual, but it had been at a wonderful park in Walpole, and where we feed the families and we do fun games. And so you can imagine that there's a lot of different volunteering opportunities there. And also, if you might have a child over 15 who you might like to have them have an opportunity of service, anyone can be a buddy if they're 15 and up. Or if you know any therapists, we're always needing more therapists, because as you can imagine, as the awareness of Comfort Zone is happening, as the need is happening, there's more need for therapists to support more of these kids as we're doing more and more camps. And then, yes, the third part is sponsoring a child. And just to give you an idea of some of the numbers, you know, it's $250 to sponsor a child for a virtual program. That includes providing them a mentor, and we send a big care package home for them to have fun and games and things to do virtually. It's $600 to send a child to the camp for the entire weekend. And so there's other, you know, there's certainly other opportunities to donate and send a family on the virtual, the 5K. I'm sorry about that. I'm still getting caught up on, is it virtual or an actual? So our plan is that by next year we'll be able to return to many of the on-site camps that the kids have loved. But that's really the whole story of Comfort Zone. And so, as I said, you know, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. What I'd like to do is really open it up to Q&A for you, and, you know, ask me anything that you'd like. And as I said, I will happily follow up with the things that I wrote for Klaus for the Rotarian 3 levels of outreach. And if anyone will be interested, I'm happy to, I have my personal speech that I gave a couple years ago at the Boston Children's Museum. Above there, they were having a National Children's Day. And it has a lot more detail about the camps and my personal story and how all of this came to be, and really, you know, the process of matching that goes into this. Because each child that goes, I mean, this is a mental health program, so there are intake coordinators that are needed. It's very important to make sure the child is safe, the match as well, and that they're okay to participate in the program, as well as nurses that are on site for everything, because, you know, some of the children are taking medication. So please, that's really all I had planned, and I'd love to open it up for all of you to ask questions.
Well, I'd like you to know that our club has agreed to sponsor at least 2 children to virtual camp, and that Phil is the gateway for that. So
thank you.
the normal ages that these kids are when they come to Comfort.
Excellent question. So they actually run 2 programs, 7 to 17 and 18 to 25. And they do run them separately because they do feel like the older kids have different needs, and, you know, really, you know, keeping them separated.
And the other question is, how your daughter was what, a year and a half after her loss, or 2 years when she went?
She was 5. 5 years after. She was 3 when he passed and 8 when she first attended.
When is this most useful for a child? Is it useful immediately after they lose their loved one, or is it more useful later on for them?
Well, I can only speak personally, and I'm not a mental health professional, but for me personally, you know, they start at 7 for a reason. I think prior to that, she was just too young. She couldn't communicate. She didn't understand what was going on with her. So I am very thankful that she got in as early as she possibly could, because what's happened afterwards, Steve, is she's actually wanted to go back multiple times. She can't wait to return. She sees some of the kids she met the prior year. She meets new kids. So she likes to go. And honestly, what I noticed is that her sharing gets much, she shares a lot more. It's much deeper, and she's able to really address and communicate more issues. However, when she was littler, it helped her with confidence and just being able to get through the day.
So I was happy to hear that you're a Boston University Terrier. Great. I'm a professor at BU and also a Terrier as well. I'm an occupational therapist, and we're always looking for volunteer experiences for our students. Do you have an occupational therapist there at all, or is it a social worker, a nurse? Because some of the placements need to have an OT. Some others don't.
Okay. What could be best is maybe we figure out a connection of someone at the corporate office who can really help explain to you what is the level of volunteering that they need, because there are certain areas that they go through a little bit of special training.
That'd be great.
So I
put in the chat box my email.
Okay.
Directly to you. Thank you.
Perfect.
So much. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you. You know, I actually didn't imagine. I have to admit, I was really blind to the transformation of my family. It was the nurse who noticed the transformation. Honestly, I was just hanging on as a single mother and trying to get through my day. And because it's different when you're, I try and explain this to many people, it's different when you're divorced or you have at least another parent who could carry some of the load. It's everything falls to one. So I'm very lucky that, you know, I had a good job, I had a career, I'm very resourceful. And when I started speaking, I was being asked to talk to some of my families in town who weren't as resilient or, and had financial troubles and other things. And it's really been fulfilling and healing for me to help other people and be okay with sharing my story, because I found it's very powerful to let other people, even moms or dads, know it's going to be okay. It can get better. And I sometimes actually even speak to them personally.
Sherri, I'm sure you know of this resource, but I'd like to share one that is closer to home here. It's in Arlington. It has a slightly different, has a very different setup because kids often go there on a weekly basis for some extended period of time. It's called the Children's Room. And they do absolutely excellent stuff, but in a different way than the camp. And I have referred people to it more than once, and it is highly, very highly regarded. It's worthwhile, and I will do that.
Thank you, George. My daughter had, there's one in Worcester, and she had attended that for one session. I'll be honest with you. In order for her to make that connection, she needed to go on a more consistent, recurring basis to see those kids.
Exactly.
And it was not an option for me, as trying to work as a single mom, to get her 35 minutes into Worcester. I did try it. And then I tried a Saturday one that was a hospice one that was in Sudbury. And again, it just, the time in order for her to connect to those kids was just not something I could support as a single mom. So that's how, but it has a lot of value, and it's amazing if you can get your child there on a recurring basis.
Yeah, and some can and some can't.
I gathered that the kids can go multiple times and do go multiple times to camp.
Yes, they can only go once a year though. So they go to camp once a year, and then how we support their connection is by having events for them. So usually in August, there would be a fun day. We got a luxury box at the Celtics game last year, and there were about 20 people or so that went to that. We do the Walk to Remember in Walpole. So we give the kids other coming together activities so they can keep that connection, because we have to restrict them to just one camp over the summer, which seems to actually work for family schedules. And then also what happens is on Friday night of the camp, the parents or caregivers can come together and have a session. And then we also return on a Sunday for the memorial service. So it's not as if it's only supporting the kids, it's also the family structure as well. And what that also does is, again, the families do the Walk to Remember. So it allows parents to reconnect as well.
If I can, so how many camps now during COVID, how often are you running the camps?
Well, they're doing virtual, and they've had some that they've had like 100 kids at. They're doing them, I'd have to look at the calendar, but I safely say it's about one every couple months, which has been nice because, you know, there's more kids in need with COVID, and they've had really good response. We've been tracking the kids' comments coming out of virtual because it's very different than being in person. But I think that the kids going through virtual schooling has really helped them to be open to the virtual experience and to bridge them until we can open the camps next summer, which usually start in April, I have to say, April, May. The goal is to do a few strategic partnership camps and then some 3 or 4 general camps. But, you know, I just want to say how my original idea came together was when I was talking to Klaus and District Governor Giano, was that if I could, maybe, and I see it's a little bit different now, but if I could reach, and each Rotary sponsored one child from here, from Sturbridge to Boston, Klaus was saying there's over 50 clubs, you know, $600 for each club, that would actually put together a whole strategic partnership for the Rotary. So that was my original, that's one of my ideas. I mean, there's certainly, I wrote to the Rotaract Club to try and have volunteers and reach out to BU. And now what's happening is local, different Rotaries are actually asking me to present. So the message is twisting and turning in different formats that I thought, but that's one of the ideas of a strategic partnership Rotary, ultimately a Rotary camp. Because what I'm realizing is it's the Rotaries who are connected to, they're doing the service, but they're connected to the school nurses and the guidance counselors in the school. And I have to say that as a mother, and my experience doing these last 2 family programs out here in Sturbridge, the moms or dads or grandparents, I feel they need to speak to someone. They can't look at hey, here's a flyer and say, I'm going. It's a very personal thing that's happened. And the school nurse talking to them, or their therapist, like happened to me. I went into therapy saying, I'm going to do whatever that therapist says because I'm so desperate to save us. And I'm thankful I did. But it took her talking to me as a parent. So that's why I'm realizing, and had talked to Klaus about how important it is getting the message out to you all, because you're the ones in your community on the ground that know the resource officers who are actually on the front line with many of these families as well. So.
Well, I'm a little long in the tooth, but I do remember when I was very young, and I had problems that I now think are relatively minor, how much I felt so alone, like nobody else in the world felt that way or had that problem. And I can't imagine what the impact would have been if one of my parents had died or one of my siblings when I was that age. And I am sure, as all get out, that those kids heal each other much faster than anybody else can heal them.
Comfort Zone Camp is a bereavement camp for kids ages 7 to 17 who have lost a parent or sibling. This is a free service to about 65 kids that attend every single one of our camps. Camps are focused on providing a therapeutic approach to grief, trying to create as many opportunities as possible for kids to express themselves in a healthy way. Whether it's talking in a healing circle, whether it's a group activity, our mission is to build a community, to build a place where a kid can come and grieve, heal, and grow in a safe environment, and that's what we're creating with our volunteers.
That's sort of the theme of this place, is to take a safe risk, and we make it safe for people and kids to share their story.
Death and the grieving process, you always think to yourself, this is so unique, no one understands, no one really gets what I'm going through, and to be able to come here, you're surrounded by people who are going through the same situation. It really is, it's life-changing.
I thought that nobody was going to understand the pain that I was feeling, and I was actually pretty scared. And then when I got here, I don't want to leave.
And they'll one by one have the opportunity to tell in their words what's happened. For them to say, I've lost my dad or my mom died. And you really get to understand what are some core challenges the kids are having and what they're doing to either help with that or what they're hiding from. The idea is for them to have some healthy coping skills to take home with them.
For all my regrets.
Later, regrets! See ya! Wouldn't want to be ya.
And it's a great opportunity for these kids to really build new relationships, be themselves, allow themselves to laugh, not to take themselves so seriously anymore. One of the greatest things about this camp is that it brings something so tragic and brings a lightness to it, and the fact that there's an entire community that's out there that's dealing with this.
For me, this entire experience has just been so transformative. It's helped me through my grieving process, having lost my mom a couple of years ago, knowing that there's no wrong way to grieve except to not grieve. I don't know if I could have gotten to the place that I am now without this camp.
There's such an incredible energy and positivity with everybody, and hearing the stories and having this place where everybody can share and be open and be welcomed into that and not be judged. The amount of bonding that happens in 2 days is amazing, you know? And you walk in complete strangers and you walk out feeling like a family, and it's pretty amazing.
I didn't want to come at all. I was doing everything I could to convince my mom to just let me go home. Jeff really actually pushed me to come. He made some bets. He said he'd arm wrestle me.
I was pulling every trick I knew out of the book, man.
He tried real hard, and I was a little grumpy for a couple minutes, and then, you know, Jeff really lightened my spirits. I talked to some other people, and, you know, it was great. Everybody was really nice, and I ended up having an awesome time. I had a great time.
I don't know if I can say this. To be that for somebody, it's pretty amazing.